Welcome to another lesson from the listening section, and in this video I'm going to share with you the best strategy for handling sentence completion questions. So let's get started. In sentence completion questions, you're going to be asked to write in a word that you hear from the recording, the exact word that you hear from the recording, to complete a sentence in your listening questions. So one of the things to be aware of right from the beginning is that while the word that you're listening for from the recording is exactly from the recording, the words that are in the sentence will not be exactly the same. And that's what we'll be dealing with sentence completion questions. And as usual, the very first thing to do when you approach any question in the listening section is to listen to the instructions and read the instructions and mark them just to make sure and confirm that you have seen them and are aware of exactly what your task is for this question. So first of all, you'll read the questions, and in this case, it will tell you exactly how many words you are allowed to use to answer. So no more than 2 words. And often, here's a little tip, when you have 2 words put together, it will often be an adjective and noun combination. So that's just something to be aware of when it comes to sentence completion. If it requires 2 words, you will be asked, it will most likely be an adjective and noun combination. But another thing to be aware of is that if, for example, you heard an adjective and noun combination and you only wrote the noun, you would still get your mark for that question. So read the questions carefully, underline them to make sure you've seen them, and then listen to the instruction carefully as well. Because when you listen to the instructions, this is where you get the context or the situation of the recording. And in this case, you'll see that the example question we're using is section 3. So you would clearly hear in the instructions as you listen that in section 3, you always have a group of people or a group of students working together on a project. So you're going to be listening to a conversation that involves more than 2 people. And this is a good thing to be aware of. And that's why it's important to listen to the instructions as well as to read them. So once we've listened to the instructions and marked them and know the context of what we're listening to, then we want to begin to predict. And in this case, in sentence completion, we want to look at the parts of the sentence that are already provided for us, and we want to choose words that are going to help narrow down our choices. They're going to help us predict and limit our options so that we know exactly what we're listening for. And we can see that in this set of questions, there's a pattern, and it's a good thing to be aware of patterns. And we have a series of actions in this set of questions. Demanded a great deal of, improved something, it was structured, and enjoyed meetings. So we're also going to be listening for past tense, and we're going to be listening for probably a noun and adjective. So as we underline our key words, this gives us the best hint and the best possibility of answering correctly. And one of the things to be aware of, as I've already mentioned, is be aware of synonyms and paraphrasing, because we've just underlined words like demanded and improved and enjoyed, and where chances are we're not going to hear those exact words, even though they're keywords, we're not going to hear the exact words in the recording.
it's most likely that you're going to hear a synonym for these words. So here's an example of what you might come across. In one of the partial sentences we're given, it says, studying with the Open University demanded a great deal of. And this is what we're listening for, but chances are we're not going to hear the word demanded. It will be said in a different way. For example, my studies required. So required is a synonym of demanded. And instead of a great deal of, we're going to hear something like a high level of. So we're going to hear a slightly different phrase. So one of the key tips for answering sentence completion questions is to be aware of synonyms and paraphrasing. And this is a good measurement of your English language ability. So if you're working on improving your English while you're preparing for IELTS, synonyms and paraphrasing are a good area to work on and to be aware of. So we're going to listen to the instructions. We're going to predict using keywords and be aware of synonyms and paraphrasing. The other thing that will give you a good clue and something to be aware of and make sure of is grammar accuracy. So if you're filling in a word, you just have to make sure that it's grammatically accurate with the rest of the sentence. So if it requires a noun and you put a verb, then you know it won't be grammatically correct. So this is where you need to focus on the type of word so that it makes the full sentence accurate as far as grammar goes. So in the recording, you might hear something, I'm so frustrated that the insurance company are taking so long to settle my claim. But the answer is actually, John found it frustrating. It's the same idea, the same word. It's just in a different grammar form. So just be aware of making sure that you put in the correct grammar form. And this will be something that you'll hear clearly in the recording. So make sure, again, that you follow the instructions, you predict the type of words, but be aware that the words you hear in the recording could be synonyms or a paraphrase of those words. And as you answer your questions, make sure that the sentence is grammatically correct once you've inserted your answer. And then you begin to answer. And remember, in sentence completion, spelling is important. You have to know how to spell the words correctly because this will determine whether you get a mark or not. But remember, during the test and while you're listening to the recordings is not the time to check your answers. When you're given time to check the answers, just keep moving forward and prepare for the next set of questions. The time to check your spelling is after the listening test is completed and you're given that 10 minutes to transfer your answers to your answer sheet. This is the time when you can check your spelling. So I want to just finish with one quick tip. If you hear a word while you're listening to the recording and you're not sure how to spell it, just write it in anyways, because at that moment, when you're under a little bit of pressure, maybe feeling a little nervous or anxious, you may not think as clearly about the spelling as you would when you have a little more time to think about it. So even if you're not exactly sure of the spelling, write the word in any way you can. And then again, when you're transferring your answers to your answer sheet, you can give a little more thought to the spelling of that word and possibly spell it correct. I hope you found this helpful, and I want to wish you all the best as you prepare for the IELTS exam.